And essentially, you know, I am going to start off with the word called synthesis. How many of us relate to this term called synthesis in this context? Can we just have a few voices explain or relate to this term called synthesis? Anyone, please? Okay, so the term synthesis is used in this particular context to the five things that we associate with anything that is called a product, a process, or a service, or a platform. And that essential synthesis is basically value, right? Value is basically what we are talking about in the context of uh, Dr. Said. Are we able to bring the presentation up? I had sent you the presentation on your mail. Okay, I can see some. So this is great. I'm seeing some reactions here. Combining ideas, chemical reaction, collaborative process of sense making. Yes, these are all right. So these are all the right answers. So let's go to the first slide. So I'm going to basically start off with something that we have to understand. What is so in my previous session, I had talked about things changing, right? The strategic point of inflection. We talked about what really is that strategic point of inflection is that movement from financial ecosystems to human ecosystems. So in order to understand, so ecosystem, that term called ecosystem, we need to understand what is an ecosystem. A system where people share the economy. So when you say people share the economy, in the past, a few people who had the money, the education, the power, and therefore the power, they shared the ecosystem. And that ecosystem was financially driven because they had that power, the power of finance. They drove the ecosystem. So there were a few who established a few things, whether it was a bank, whether it was a government, whether it was a transportation, and the majority followed, whether it was factories. Today, that is slowly and dramatically and definitely shifting into a human ecosystem, where many of us now can find the capital, we can find expression to our ideas, we can participate in governments more freely, we can travel anywhere in the world, we can connect with anyone in the world, and we can make things happen. That is a human system. That connection, this connection is not technology alone. This connection is a human connection. And so it has its positives and the negatives, but we will look at the positives of the connection to the human ecosystem. So that is completely changing the way in which value is perceived. If I can go to the next slide. We just talked about, so product synthesis. The synthesis is about the five values of, so combining the ideas or combining the chemical reaction or collaborative process of sense making of these five types of values, which is what we call as product synthesis. What are those five? It is most of us understand this only from the perspective of, economic value. And that was how it was in the past. And that is what we need to change, right? Because now the value is not just about economic value. It is, and why am I saying this? Can anyone basically tell me why is it that I'm saying this, that the economic value has to change to the 5 values I'm talking about? I'm actually looking at the chat screen. If anybody can even put the chat up. It's okay if you don't want to speak. So as I was explaining, right, we had the ability to look at it earlier only from economic value, because we invested money and we expected a return on it. And so the focus was how well so the customer focus that people talked about earlier was more from the point of view of how your product that you create, how will the customer use it? It was not about whether it is relevant to the customer's life. It was about, how the customer will buy it and how the customer will use it. And so you created that, and therefore it was economic value. But today, when we look at product synthesis, it is combining 5 values: the functional value, the economic value, the brand value, the emotional value, and the lifetime value. Right? So I want to take an example, for example, of Apple. So almost every year, now Apple comes up with a new version of its products and services. And there are a bunch of people who, no matter what, will go and buy that. Why are they doing that? What do they see in an Apple product? Can anybody respond? What is the value? Are they seeing all the 5 values? Or are they seeing only, what are the values that they are seeing in a product? So I've given you the answer to the question I answered. So I'm asking you another question. So what are the values that any one of you, if you own an Apple product, or if you own a Samsung product, or any other product, what are the values that you see? Do you see a product from all the 5 perspectives that I'm talking about? The point is, yes, you do. It may be conscious, it may be unconscious, it may be subconscious, right? So I have a response here that, quality, assurance, design, after service, right? So let's take quality. In these 5 values, right, which is the one that responds to quality? We have 5 values that are listed here: functional value, economic value, brand value, emotional value, and lifetime value. So if I very basically talk about quality, right? Functional value, so I'm getting answers that it is a functional value. Why is it a functional value? What is the definition of quality? By the way, the answer is right. The answer is it's a functional quality. So yeah. So now I have one answer. Dr. Vikas says it could be an emotional value. Okay. Well, actually, so how do you separate the difference between a functional value and an emotional value? Okay. So first of all, this is a functional value. So I asked the other question is, so we talked about it in the context of quality. So before we get to that part, so I had Sarita Roy say quality, assurance, design, after service, right? So let me put this in perspective. Every one of us, whether we buy a product or a service, there are 5 ways in which we perceive value. Okay, it starts with quality, it moves to cost. So for every quality, so the example is if you want an automobile, but if you want the quality of a Mercedes-Benz, it costs something. If you want the value of a Maruti, it costs something else, right? So there is a difference in the quality of the components that a automobile is made of. So quality, cost, delivery, service, flexibility. These are the 5 things that you have to QCDSF. You have to keep in mind, but whether we do it consciously, unconsciously, subconsciously, these are the 5 dimensions of value at an individual or a product level that we perceive. Okay, so now we're talking about quality, and therefore we said what represents the functional value. We talked about, so therefore I think a majority of you said functional value, and I agree with you that it is a functional value. And why is it a functional value? Because of how we define quality. So quality is doing it right the first time. That is the definition of quality. The definition of quality is doing it right the first time. So therefore, what we talk about here, what is CX? So when you try to talk about this concept of synthesis of product challenge, you will normally get thrown these 3 X's on your face. It's a CX, UX, UI. So you have to really understand what the CX is. CX is nothing but customer experience. How is a customer experience formed? A customer's experience is formed because of engagement. Right? So the engagement is something that when you engage and when something works for you. So if your aspiration, for example, with a bank is, the bank participates in your life, and you have a 18-year-old son who's going to university, and the bank comes up and says, we know that you have a son that's going to university and you may need an educational loan, and this is the way in which we will write an educational loan, not on you, but on him. And we know we will basically create a plan where when he graduates, we will start deducting the money from his salary. When the bank is able to come up with a product, okay, that the function of it is to participate in your lives, as opposed to it making you poorer. You begin to appreciate that. Now that is a functional value. Right? Now, the other part, therefore, is so functional value is quality. Now, what is cost? So I have somebody here. I have D.D. Murudeshwar asking me lifetime value at intersection of all 4. So that is what is the cost. See, the cost of what you buy, it's an asset that you're buying. A product is an asset in your life. So for a cost that you give, is it going to be worth 1 year? Is it going to be worth 5 years? It can be worth 1 year, but will it give you the value of 5 years? So lifetime value is that value which is at the intersection of all the values, all the other 4 values, right? So I'm beginning to enjoy this lecture a lot more because you're asking me questions and I'm able to answer to you. So we started with quality. The cost part of it is basically the lifetime value. Okay. The third QC, D. What is D? D is delivery. Delivery is for time. Okay. Time is, what is the time? How timely is a product or a process or a service serving you? This is the idea of delivery. It's like saying, you order on Swiggy. Now, you're hungry, and if the Swiggy is able to understand your hunger levels and is able to, instead of and give you in one of the criteria it should try and capture when it is trying to capture your requirement for food is what is your hunger level, right? And be able to make a suggestion intelligently saying, you're hungry, you need food in 15 minutes, you're ordering from a place which is 40 minutes delivery, order this. because it's among your favorites, right? So that is basically what it is trying to deliver to you, right? So what is that? What value is that? Is it an emotional value? Is it an economic value? So now I have narrowed this down to two choices, because it is not brand value and it is not lifetime value. So what value is it? Is it an economic value or is it a emotional value? Okay, now that is an emotional value. It is why? Because it is intelligent. It says, I know you like the other food, but you're hungry. And I need to fulfill that. At the same time, I need to be able to pick something that is still in your preference list. Right? So that is the emotional value. Every single time you're able to deliver something on time, you're able to meet those expectations at that particular point in time, right? Then we come to service, which is empathy, right? What is that? What value is that? The empathy is essentially the brand value. You always look for somebody to be able to understand you and address you in the way in which you are, not the way in which they are, right? When you do that, that is the brand value. And finally, all this comprises into whether you want to buy a product or not, which is basically the economic value, which is the time you actually buy a product or a service. So the essence of product synthesis is these 5 values that you look for in terms of creating, how can a product be delivered. Now, in the past, companies used to do it, but companies did it like, if I were to pause here and give you a couple of examples. So Amazon does think about your value, right? But Amazon thinks about it not from your life's perspective. Amazon thinks about it from actually the real customers it serves, which is the enterprises, their business, right? So what does it do? It basically recommends the products. When you buy an Amazon product, it says 5 other associated products were bought by other people. So it makes you buy more and more without consideration for the fact whether that is necessary for you or not, right? But if it were to change that and say, no, my customer is the individuals who really create my economy, what would it do? It would change the way in which enterprises create products and services, and that is something that the enterprises would basically it would sell on its platform. But it can't do anything today because that is the way in which it was created. The business model was created from taking the enterprise products and bringing them to you. This is the old world way of looking at things. When we become more and more independent in our decision making in our everyday lives, and we have the power of internet to make those decisions, that power shifts from enterprises it shifts to individuals. And that is a fundamental shift that we have to basically understand in the context of product synthesis. Okay, because it is the people who use the product, and therefore it is their value that is more important than the value of creators. So if we basically take it to the next slide, what do you see? I want you to take a look at the slide and be able to interpret it. So either some of you do research or you don't do research, but you will see typically when we do product research and we try to find, you will find research being done for its feasibility, viability, functionality, usability, durability, sustainability, scalability, capability, and interoperability. These are all the abilities of the product for which you are basically researching and trying to find answers from people. So if you remember what I said today morning, I want you to tell me that how can you find answers from people who do not know, who have never traveled on, let's say, a spacecraft. If you ask them, how do you like a spacecraft? How do you like to travel in a spacecraft? What kind of answers do you expect? Can anybody tell me how this, so you want to take people on a spacecraft. Keeping in mind the 5 value perceptions of quality, cost, delivery, service, and flexibility. How would you expect a company to do research with you as an individual? Anybody? It's a very straightforward question. I'm asking you that, I am a company. I'm Elon Musk, and I come to your university, and I'm asking you guys, I would like to give you the opportunity to do space travel. Now I'm telling you, okay, please tell me, what do you really want in that space travel? So it's based on their imagination. Dr. Syed says based on their imagination. Yeah. So what do you imagine space travel to be? And my next question, therefore, would be, whatever you imagine, is it right or is it wrong? Right? Do you know how the seating arrangement is? Do you know what the food is? Do you know what the preparation is? So what I would like to experience, right? So you're saying you're showing the experience. So I can't give this to you in words. That there are many things in this. Space travel is not like it's traveling outside the orbit of the Earth. So therefore, you have to physically be, I don't know how many people in this have taken treks or gone to a if you go, let's say that you take a trek to the Himalayas or Mansarovar, right? You just can't go there. Your body has to be prepared. You have to prepare your body to be able to breathe at high altitudes, lower temperatures. And so similarly, space travel is even more difficult. You have to condition you need to have a certain frame of mind, you need to have a certain frame of body, a certain frame of reference. So immersion. So what would if I'm Elon Musk and I come to your university and offer you this, I have to be able to take a bunch of you who have that mental strength to say, yeah, I want to experience something new that I have never known about, and slowly immerse you through that experience of preparing you and actually giving you a spacecraft experience, right? This is what they are doing right now, whether it is an Elon Musk or whether it is the AWS chief. They're actually doing the same thing. They are taking people on space projects to give them the experience, because these are alpha customers, right? They embrace what they don't know very easily. They embrace innovation very, very easily. They do not have to be sold to. They have the ability to do what it takes to, get onto that flight and make that flight, right? So in this lecture, what I'm going to talk about is, we started with understanding what synthesis is of a product. The challenge is, how do you convert a majority of them to understand what values they expect most, and so that you can build that, right? So whether it is the which values should supersede whom. So you will have different segments, and then you will have cohorts in them, right? So please tell me, I'm using words and I don't want to basically leave them without creating an understanding. Does everyone here understand these two terms that I'm using, which is segments and cohorts? Okay, segments are customer segments are basically customer types. They are primarily driven by a demography. Okay, cohorts are driven by psychography. That is, how in that demography, how do they think, and who are the most likely, right? So we discuss those three aspects of demography, biography, and psychography. So you may be a demography, and in that demography, ready to accept the challenges of a space travel, and you submit yourself wholeheartedly and say, yeah, I want to do this. Okay, which means that you're demographically and biographically right. But if your body conditions, if your health is not attunable to this, you cannot be accepted because you're a risk, right? So I think the first aspect of understanding, that you have created this framework, then you have to understand the demography, biography, and psychography and fit that into your research scale, right? So that is when you will actually get the right feasibility, viability, functionality, and all this ability of your product or a service that delivers to the value, right? So this is where we are going with this discussion. I want to pause here for a minute and basically get an understanding from any one of you as to what did you understand so far. I'm good with all you putting your text together. So can one or two of you at least provide me with the answer in terms of saying, okay, where are we going? What did we address? When we the first slide, for example, right? What did we talk about? We talked about the financial system, running the human ecosystem earlier. That needs to be reversed, where the human ecosystem needs to run the financial ecosystem, which means the power shifts from corporations, from governments and enterprises to individuals who basically form the governments. So we forget the fact that it's the individuals who create this. So what it basically means we're talking about is we're talking about a transformation in our societies which is powered by humans. We have abrogated that earlier because we did not have the necessary means. Today, technology provides you that means, the connection, the internet, the digital technologies, the ability to compute great amounts of data, right, is allowing you to do that. We then move to the next slide to get an understanding so far of what, so the very understanding of the topic, which is synthesis of product challenge findings. What is synthesis? We understood that it is basically a amalgamation, if you may, of what constitutes a product, and therefore that has to be understood in the context of value. And we said there are 5 values that essentially determine product synthesis: functional value, brand value, emotional value, lifetime value, and therefore economic value, right? And when we use that, we said they correlate to the 5 perceptions of value that we humans understand, which is quality, cost, delivery, service, and flexibility. And then in the third slide, we understood basically what is the ability of the product that we are actually trying to enhance, okay, which basically corresponds to the perceptions of value we talked about. So, how do we strengthen the product? So that's basically where we are. Any questions at this point in time? Because I'm going to now shift this to a next level of understanding. So that is the reason why I'm pausing to ask if anybody has any questions. I'm going to wait a second or a few minutes or a minute before I move to the next one. Okay, let's move to the next slide. So what do you see here? Okay, this at least someone in the audience can respond. What is it that you see here on the slide? Nothing? Can anyone look at the slide and tell me what, if you make any meaning out of this? Things that happen in one's life, okay? Aspects of life, okay? And there are so many parameters in our life. So I already talked about this in my previous session. That is, there are 7 stations of life, if you really want to understand. There are through which, we journey, every single day of our lives. Right? These are the 7 stations. Environment, education, health, wealth, technology, mobility, and governance. But along with those terms, there is something that is there with them. There is also some other text. What is that? Can you please respond? Along with environment, for example, you have climate change. What is that? What is climate change? Along with education, there is outdated pedagogy. What does outdated pedagogy mean to you? Along with health, there is some other terminology there. Irrelevant response. What does that mean to you? Adverse effects of environment. So that adverse effects is basically the challenge, right? I'm still going back to our title, product challenge. When we are creating products and services, so these are the you have to be able to find, these are the challenges to which your products and services have to respond. Exactly, the hurdles. Or with new online scenario, we have to update teaching tools. Exactly. The way in which you teach, the way in which you can learn, right? So you have to be able to, so these are the challenges when we're talking about, so understanding the challenge for creating the products or the processes or the services that we're talking about is basically, so understanding first the value. Value is who? Not the corporations, but the individuals. And the individuals basically creating this and saying how, not just consuming, but contributing. So what we are seeing here, these are the challenges that you're seeing, right? Like that we need to be able to that we need to be able to address from a product or a process or a service perspective. So my question to all of you is to pause and think for a minute. Okay, when you are able to address the challenges, what happens to all of us? When there are corporations, when there are individuals, when there are products that you address these challenges effectively, what happens to all of us? We become productive, or our quality of life gets better, right? So our quality of life, so basically, this is where I need us to think is, we talked about the strategic inflection point. There are today, if you look at the world, every day you have a new product or a new service being advertised and everywhere around you. The question that you have to think about is, are they really improving my quality of life? And I will not even wait to pause. I will answer that question for myself. When I see many of these products and services, they don't improve my quality of life because they don't involve me, they don't involve my inputs into them, and they don't make an impact on my life. That is one thing. The second thing is these products that come up, like for example, if the government is introducing a way of creating loans for startups, that is under governance. So what does that do? It reduces the divisive social inequities. So it can make more of us entrepreneurs. But is that well done? Is a product known to many of us? Do you know how to access it? Do you know how to be able to access that loan and be able to create an enterprise? Or are we going to be continue to run our lives with a few families making more money in India, right? So this is the question. The question is, when we're talking about the challenges of products, we have to be able to address them wholly in themselves, and we have to be able to connect them with the others. So let me ask you, let me stay with, for example, environment. When we talk about environment, and we talk about climate change, what is the first thing that comes to any of your minds? Which part of our life comes to your mind? Anybody?
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Climate change is due to, sir, the accumulation of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. It's the
Yeah.
factors.
Right. So what causes that?
There
Who
are so
causes
many
that?
causes means a health impact and
No. Who causes greenhouse gases?
sir, the causes means factories are and some transportation sector they are producing the greenhouse gases.
Every sector, right?
Yeah, right, sir. Right, sir. We are also producing, sir, carbon dioxide, and if accumulation, we are accumulating it, and if we are not cleaning and proper source and things are not there, then the accumulation will more and more.
So it impacts every aspect of our lives.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Whether it is, you start with food. So the main things wherever there is creation and making, right? Whether it is industries, whether it is agriculture, where you create food, and then it is you just now talked about transportation, whether it is the logistics part of it, of storing them using chemicals, right?
Right, sir. Private sector also there.
Then it is about converting them in industries into food products, whether it is that food is good for us, the packaging part of it. So it is not any one particular segment, right? It is an entire value chain. The way in which food is created till the time the food is consumed is basically the entire value chain, correct? So every single part of it is causing climate change, right? Basically, if you look at it now, and therefore environment has a connection to education. Education has a connection to health. Health has a connection to wealth. So we talk about poverty, right? So we talk about what is poverty. Poverty is just not being poor. It's just not having money. It is the poverty. Poverty means that the inability of people to imagine a better life. That is poverty. Right? If you imagine a better life, you will find a way, or you will at least agitate to find a way to make that happen. So the problem with when we talk about poverty is, and so what am I doing here, right? I'm trying to create the right context. The right context is basically the right synthesis. The synthesis of what? The value. Right? So when I'm looking at wealth and I'm talking about wealth creation, for example, right? I am looking at what are the 5 values that constitute it. And therefore, I'm trying to say what is the product that I must create in the wealth industry that will enable me to address this item, this challenge called poverty, right? So what am I doing therefore? Is, so if I were to ask you, so this is what, for example, I am doing leading Giga Technologies. I'm talking about the future of work being different to the way in which we do work today. Because today when we look at work, we believe that most of us have to go through education, and then we have to basically find a job. And when we go to the job, whoever is my boss will give me instructions, and I will have to follow those instructions and basically do this and earn a salary at the end of it. I want to change that narrative a bit. What I want to do is, I want to say, okay, yeah, I will find a job, but when I go to the job, I also have ideas. I want to be able to implement my ideas because I believe there is a value I can deliver to my customer segment. It can be as simple as you going to your classroom and looking at a different way in which you teach, or a different way in which you educate, or a different way in which you engage with your students, right? And in that, and basically, that is what education is all about. It is about changing minds. It is about making minds think differently. It's only then that the syllabus and the syllabi come into play. So how do I prepare myself? How do I create that performance? How do I plan my approach to a subject, right? In which so that is essentially what we're talking about, in the way in which you start looking at things differently, and understand the context of the value that you can deliver. And that synthesis of value is what addresses the product challenge. And in a sense, this diagram, it's very complex, and it has to be addressed more deeply in terms of what it takes to see this in a complete unified manner. But the essence is that we need a more holistic approach to design. And that holistic approach is first creating that understanding, and then leading it to small packages of experimentation that we can create in order to be able to take it forward more successfully. I will give you a very simple example of how I have done it in my own life, in the recent few days, so that you understand it as an example. So Giga Technologies is a US and India incorporated company, right? And so we have started, we have created a engineering center here in Bengaluru. And what we have done is, and I'm going down to the small, we hired a office boy. Okay, I hate to use that term, but I have to use it in the context that we all understand. So when I hired him, I had a conversation with him. So he is somebody who is not even a 10th grade pass, right? He, a bright young boy, 20 years old. And he came to me and asked me that he wanted a job on the first day that I actually came in to settle the office space here for the engineering center. I looked at him and said, I'll give you a job. And then I sat him down and I had a conversation with him. I told him, if you did this part, you will get X amount of money. If you did this part, you get Y amount of money. And I waited for his reaction. And he thought about it and he said, I will do the job of an office boy, and I'll also undertake the maintenance of the engineering center. I said, very good. And I said, this is what happens and this is what you need to do. So, and then I drilled into him the sense that, I said, now I'm giving you this job. So I gave him an offer letter, and I said he was perhaps earning about 12,000 and odd rupees. And I made him an offer of 25,000 rupees per month. And then I said, this compensation is only for the job description that is put in this letter. But what I want to see is, in this next 1 year, we want to educate you to become a service master, so that you're able to create a enterprise that basically packages service, and you can service apartments, you can service offices, and I want you to become an entrepreneur. And once you have the capability, I will invest in your enterprise. And I want to see you become successful in the next 3 years as an entrepreneur. I would hate to see you being an office boy after 6 months. What does this little story tell you in terms of what is, it's a very small example, but I just want to hear from some of you what it gives you, what is the context it gives you in the context of wealth creation and poverty. Can somebody switch on? Because this is a narrative. I want to understand whether you understand the concept I'm talking about. There are no right and wrong answers. All I'm looking for is what do you understand from this perspective?
So he will aspire to reach that in 6 months. He has a set goal and he would like to reach that stage, because he's going to benefit in every way.
So to that observation, right? What happened here is I am looking at it from his lifetime value. Okay. He is, according to him, in his own eyes, he is hopeless. He is 10th grade, not even a 10th grade pass. So any person who's going to employ him is going to look at him from the perspective of an office boy or some menial job. He doesn't have the skills. But I look at him and I say, no, you're very young. There is so much to skill yourself, so much opportunity, right? But in order to even before you skill yourself, you need to basically have something else. What is that? So I'm giving you a clue here. This thing is called capability. The word called capability. We discussed the increasing the threshold of capability from one level to another level, right? So capability, and I'm now giving away the answer as well, is a dual word. It is the capacity to transform and the ability to perform. So the second part of it, we all understand, is a skill. Ability to perform is a skill. But in order to choose the right skill, you need to have that first one, which is the capability to transform, the capacity to transform. What is it I need to transform into? So I gave him that means. I said, you have to transform yourself into an entrepreneur. You have to be able to think along those lines. Now I'm giving you a context. Now I'm going to lay down your map for the next 6 months to 1 year. The challenge is, the product challenge for him is that he has to become an entrepreneur in 1 year. He has to transform himself from an office boy to an entrepreneur, to servicing in a limited context within the office, to servicing the same service to different customers across. And I said, we live in the office is in a place called Malleshwaram. It is a ward with about 150,000 people. I said, you have to be able to find ways in which you can service apartments and offices in a structured manner, and we will help you get there. Now, this is basically addressing wealth creation. That is, the poverty here is of a young person who has come from some other part of the country. He's from Orissa, come to Bangalore in search of employment, and instead of being condemned forever to do an office boy's job, you have to be able to create an avenue that enables him to grow and shift to becoming an entrepreneur. in an area where he can do it today, and he can basically, if he does service, you improve the ability of doing service excellence. So that is essentially the way in which, so this is what I'm coming to is, this is a continuous process. So when he does that, you teach him how to use materials that are environmentally friendly. You create an opportunity for him. So education can be both formal and informal. Formal education is what all of you are engaged, through a university. Informal education is through the content we generate, whether we write blogs, whether we do videos, whether we do. So that is informal education, and creating a health impact, creating where, for example, creating an emotional state that enables people to become creative, to become responsive, to be contributing, right? The same educator can come into a classroom and condemn his entire class, or make them creators. Not going on the two extremes of saying, you are mediocre, but I can tolerate mediocrity. But at the same time, not being on the other side where you're saying, my sense of excellence is such that I cannot tolerate you. So, bringing that spectrum to view and trying to change the way in which we engage. And then that is the part we also looked at in the previous lecture, the engagement and the experience. How do we change that engagement and experience to the relevance of where we are at the strategic inflection point that we are in our societies? How do we use the methods and means we have today, which is the digital world? And how can we change that value, the perception of value to the new? That, to me, is very important. And that is essentially what we're talking about here in terms of the 7 stations of life being connected, seeing those 7 connection of those 7 stations, and being able to create design, and therefore understanding the value, the synthesis of that, and then being able to shape and shift our future from the present. That is where this is going. Any questions? Any observations before we go to the next slide? Any questions, please? Just make me happy for a minute and ask me a question. You're all educators, so I don't need to tell you that we all learn by asking questions. Okay, let's move to the next one, the next slide, which is, so essentially what we are talking about, right? We're talking about moving. So what is missing today? What is missing today in the narrative, in the physicality of what we are seeing around us? We are actually not seeing, the transportation of intellectual property from conceptualization to engineering to industrialization to commercialization. Why are we not seeing it? Because, people don't understand the difference between an application and a solution. This is why, right? So basically, if you look at this diagram, you will see that, it all starts with ideas. And if those ideas are not shaped to the future, to the aspiration, it is useless. An idea may sound new to you, but that is out of ignorance. But it has to be not out of ignorance, but it has to be out of excellence. So that is where the whole idea starts. So, the qualification of research is to find out if an idea is ignorant, or is based on awareness, is it based on understanding, or is it based on definition, or is it based on competence or excellence? Ideally, your ideas have to be based on excellence. And therefore, you have to prove that with hypotheses and models, which basically lead you to creating proof of concepts. Those proof of concepts lead you to proof of successes or prototypes, which basically lead you to creating engines, components, connectors, which we call solutions. So when engineering is not about application. Engineering is about creating engines. So when Mercedes-Benz creates an engine, they don't create an engine for a car. They create an engine. A car, a rocket, an aeroplane, these are applications in which that engine is applied. So their focus is not on building cars. Their focus is on building engineering, first the engines and the components for it and how they connect in terms of their ecosystem. So when you create those solutions have segments. I said customer types. Those customer types have cohorts, which is the customer preferences. And these customer preferences are basically understood through profiling, personalization, and preferentiation as a process of industrialization. And then we locate where they are placed in the geography, which is geolocation. For each geolocation, there may be a version, there is a release, there is a support for that, and there is a scorecard that goes from the micro to the macro. And in understanding that scorecard, you create a renewal of the intellectual property process. The problem we have today is that this intellectual property transportation from conceptualization to commercialization is not a continuous one. When we talk about IP, most people are more concerned about filing patents. So I recently was speaking to Samsung, and I was saying, so they have created 7,500 patents across the world in the last 1 year. I said, these 7,500 patents, how is it making a difference to the lives of the people? I recognize that you have filed these patents, and you're bringing these products to the marketplace. How many of these 7,500 patents actually become products? You'll be very surprised to know that in the healthcare industry, out of some, there are companies that spend close to about $450 billion on research. And what is and out of every, for a single product, $450 billion for a single product. And how many products do they produce? They produce perhaps 0.005 products in 16 years. This is the economic statistical value. So who bears those costs of the failure to innovate? You and me. We pay higher drug costs because these companies don't have an efficient way of running their innovation. Right? So it's all passed down to the consumer. So it's not that the inefficiencies of corporations, the inefficiencies of our government, the inefficiencies of our municipal corporations don't have an effect on us. They do. Right? And they become even more gross when we don't protest against them. So this is this problem that we have today. That problem needs to be solved. We need more people's involvement. We need people to be able to participate in this process, right? And that participation is again possible to help customers. So what we did, I talked about it earlier. We move customers, the engagement from an alpha to a beta to a not gamma but a theta. So an alpha customer is a customer who does not have to be sold the concept of innovation. He or she will embrace innovation because they're already curious about the future. You can bring them, you can immerse them. Like I told you, it is not necessary for everyone. If I'm Elon Musk and I came to your campus and I said, I want to take you guys on a journey of space travel. It is not necessary that every one of you have to be enthusiastic. But in a crowd of 15, 20, even if two of them are good, immerse them through that experience so that they realize what it actually is. Immerse them through the concept, immerse them through the engineering, which is the alpha to the beta state. When you immerse them, they will become the first votaries. So it's like this: when you eat some phenomenal food, or you watch a great movie, or you go to a great place, and if that has gone way beyond your expectations, right? You make a conscious effort. You call your friends, you call your family, and you tell them, I went to this great place and you must experience it. And it is the same thing when the experience is on the other side of the spectrum, which is extremely bad. You say, I went to this thing, it's terrible. Don't ever waste your money on it. But if it is just about passable, if it just satisfies you, you will probably speak about it when somebody asks you, hey, you went to this place, how was your experience? Right? So your experience that of the product or the process that you create must be so great that the beta customers must be able to shout from the rooftops and get exponential customers into the system, which is the theta customers. This is the new way. So, you know, the research we were talking about, is not about creating focus groups anymore. It is about finding alpha, beta, and theta customers and increasing the rate of innovation in a new positive way. This is a fundamental shift in the synthesis of product challenge findings that we necessarily have to adapt, right? And in order to do that, you have to do something today that your future self will thank you for. Your future self will thank you for. And we can all start with little steps, right? The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So how will we shape? So it is not enough for each one of us to arrive at the future, but we have to shape it and we have to shift it and arrive there. That's basically where I would like to leave you. I'm having 7 minutes more for this session, and I'm open to questions, please.
Yes, audience, any question?
I think we can move to the next slide on the screen as well. Yeah. And this was what I explained of moving customer engagement from alpha, beta, and theta. So you have to understand that and then do something today that your future self, you know, will thank you for. So think about it from your own personal perspective. So yes, I see D.D. Murudeshwar, you made some very good, brought in some great perspectives. Behavioral change is basically, when we talk about capability, the capacity to transform, yeah, that is the behavioral change. We have to impact that behavioral change. So if a customer doesn't know how to change that behavior towards the future, the immersion is basically meant for that, to change the behavior. And when once that behavior changes and they believe that this is great for them, right, they will shout from the rooftops saying, you know, 15 others must basically experience the same. Any other questions? Come on, guys, you should have some question for me. Okay, let's take a vote. How many of you in this audience believe, have related, not believe, but related to anything that I have said so far? Do you have a, can you relate to it personally or no? Because I have failed. If you have not been able to relate to this personally, then I have failed to deliver a good lecture. So I really want to know whether you have been able to relate. Does it kindle anything personal in you? Does it make you think? If it doesn't make you think, then then I have actually wasted your time.
Excuse me, sir. It is fine, sir. We are with you, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Sir, we are here. Your delivering is very fine, sir. We do not even doubt regarding this.
Okay. Okay. If there are no questions, then I pass this back to Dr. Shabnam Syed, and thank you all for your very kind patience. My apologies with respect to the technical glitches. But I'm very grateful to all of you for giving me this opportunity to spend time with you, to share my perspectives. And as I have said, I have left my connection and my contact details with you. Any one of you, please feel free to interact with me. I will respond to every query, every question. Yeah, so I see Mr. Raghavan asking me a question. I have a question. Is our curriculum meant to make innovators? Absolutely yes. The role of an educator is not to basically cover the subject matter that is there in textbooks and what is available, but to be able to see their pupils, their students, to see a better world than what exists. To be able to see that it's absolutely critical. We basically survive in a world that we are, but it is not enough to survive. We have to thrive. In order to thrive, you have to look at new potential and new possibilities. And every educator at any given point in time must walk into a classroom planning and preparing, which is what I'm doing to you right now. Is I am hoping that I spent 3 hours at least opening up your mind to a perspective, a new perspective. I have spoken about hundreds of perspectives, but even if one perspective is something that you're willing to experiment, I think that would be great. I think I've made a difference. So I think it is absolutely important to look at it from your point of view. So real life example of applying. So I've been talking about all the real life examples. So let us take one of the things that we are actually doing at Giga, right? So I'm going to assume that many of you like cricket, you understand. So we have the examples. So in our country, if you look early in the morning on our streets, whether you're in Pune, whether you're in Bangalore, parents are now carting their little children, with heavy baggage. They take them to nets. They get them to play cricket. They go to the coaches and they tell them, please see that our son, our daughter, they play IPL and they so now they have found, earlier it used to be make my children doctors and engineers. Now they are saying make my children IPL players. They're not even asking them to make them cricketers, right? And then you have the case of a Yashasvi Jaiswal who came to Mumbai at the age of 14, a young kid. He played in the Maidan, and in order to survive, he had to go out and sell bhel puri, right? Today, in about less than 3 years, he's an Indian millionaire. He plays for the Rajasthan IPL, but his excellence, his way to get to that millions is not by robbing a bank, but actually by playing cricket so hard and practicing so hard. He was fortunate to find one coach who believed in him and took him to his house and gave him coaching and took those aspects out of his life for which he does not have to bother, so he can focus on the game. And it made him he's a celebrity. Now this kid is so focused. He's just 20 years old, right? And he's the future prospect of India. The one thing important is, he will finish his career playing cricket for India by about, when he is 25 to 30 years old. That is it. But his life and is not just, his life doesn't end when he is 30. In fact, his life begins then, right? in terms of how good a human being, how great a citizen he is going to be in the society, and what is he going to do with what he has earned, whether it is money, whether it is fame, whether it is whatever, right? So I think the idea is, when we are trying to create better societies, how do you get that process of education, ownership, and commitment through? Commitment is institutionalization of a certain way in which our society thrives. If you really look at, for example, India, we thrive, right? We survive today based on the same mentality that has been left back, of subjugation. Okay, how do we express ourselves? How do we create an opportunity to become innovators? You look at the ecosystem in India, and I'm giving some very, very practical examples. How many original ideas come out of India to create products and processes or platforms? Zero. Absolutely zero. We have not created a Google, we have not created an Apple, we have not created a AWS. We have not created any of that is making a difference to life, positive or negative. But we have so many copies. We have Flipkart, we have X, Y, and Z, and we're all in commerce. The mentality is trading. That doesn't mean that there are a lot of youngsters. When I say this, people take umbrage. No, there are a lot of youngsters who are thinking differently. We need to bring them to the front. We need to encourage them. They start from the classrooms. There is a very connected ecosystem. Whether it is educators, whether it is entrepreneurs, whether it is government officials, we need to see this connection. We need to imagine life very differently. We cannot imagine it from the past into the present. We have to imagine it from the present into the future. This point of arrival, the strategic inflection point, must be recognized. And in fact, I would very humbly state and submit, Dr. Syed, if there are opportunities where we can I can engage with your faculty. I do not want any money. I'm very happy to be able to work with you and do workshops that can basically take a very specific way of how we can think about transformation and move it forward. So
sir, we can collaborate on that, sir.
I would be very, very happy to do that. And I am somebody who believes that every human has the potential to change this world to a better place.
Sure, sir. We'll surely get back to you after the session.
Yeah.
Bhakti ma'am, over to you.
Yes, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much, sir, for sharing your valuable views on design research strategies and the product challenge findings. The examples, the case studies which you shared with our audience and all of us definitely has helped all of us to understand these challenges. The examples were very fantastic, and we definitely have received some ways to overcome them. It definitely has ignited our minds a bit, and it has opened new ways, new perspectives for all of us. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your views.
So we all are looking forward to collaborate with you. I'll surely get back to you soon, sir.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the sessions, all of you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.